Hello, everybody. Welcome to our discussion about Chapter 2 today. This is an interesting topic, I thought. I've had some experience dealing with unethical people, and I am actually kind of relieved to see that someone else has thought about it and described some of the characteristics. So I'll get to discussion. Differentiate between what our authors discuss as the nature of ethics, business ethics, communication ethics, and the OC ethics. So in the chapter 2 text, the authors discuss means and ends, where means are the tools to achieve an outcome and ends are the actual outcomes that they achieve, whether it's desired or you get secondary effects. So a little deeper, primary ends are usually the short-term direct effects of some actions, but then secondary ends are the longer term secondary or collateral effects, things you didn't intend or things you didn't think were important that end up becoming pretty negative. So with means and ends, they introduce the ethical framework of good/bad means and good/bad ends. This is rooted in more traditional philosophy as shown in table 2.2 in the book, the major ethical perspectives. Focusing next on business ethics, the authors talk about the Charrington typology of ethical lapses in business. So this is listed out on pages 74 through 77, and this study and typology shows that these ethical lapses are still prevalent today and that they follow some of the same old patterns that we're familiar with in psychology and in philosophy. Even in our modern times, with better understanding of human nature, our increased interconnection, interdependence with technology, we think we know people better, but it's still human nature and people still act badly. So this list of the typologies included things like stealing, lying, defrauding, bribing, withholding or hiding information, and cheating. So this is old, this goes way back, and it's hard to tell the difference between the kind of bad things people do and the way they did them in ancient times. Next, they discuss Reinsch's 9 basic ethical findings. These are listed on 88 through 89. And this is a study from analyzing empirical research articles in 1990. As would be expected, this analysis approach was not based in philosophical ethics, but more about modern factors in the business environment. The study of business, organizational communication is more of a modern science, and so this is a different kind of perspective on that. But maybe surprisingly, the results still came out pretty similar, except for the idea that in business, sometimes unethical behavior is useful or considered okay or even rewarded because it helps you get ahead short term. There's a lot of talk about how you've got to, take chances, do things that are not norm. You got to be a disruptor in the field in order to get ahead. All right, and the authors also mention Redding's typology of unethical organization communication, which helps focus on the ways of passing information can be analyzed for ethical behavior. All right, and so part of this question is to identify a real life ethics case to kind of support what I was talking about. It's difficult to identify where these true ethical lapses occur based on the way politics and business works today. Things are really vague. We can't be sure when it's based on facts because the facts are kind of conflicting, and information, even though it should be readily accessible, it tends to be hidden. There are things to do like putting a security classification on it or hiding it or putting encryption on it, things that keep it away from the public. And so a major event that comes to mind for me is with Boeing. And in the last few weeks, an entire line of their aircraft were essentially grounded because after a few major airline crashes, many people were killed, and then these glitches still were occurring, and so actual governments, countries in the world banned Boeing's planes from flying. And so it wasn't until Boeing's this entire line of product was grounded that Boeing started to take action. They grounded their own fleets. They started to apply software patches. But the thing that gets me is I know that accidents happen or even computer glitches happen. But when I was visiting Tacoma a couple of weeks ago, and I picked up a local newspaper in Tacoma, I saw in the middle of the business section a full-page ad from Boeing with a letter from the CEO. And normally in those things, the CEO expresses remorse. They take responsibility. They say, we're doing all these things to make sure that the planes are going to be safe. But the tone came across as being kind of smug, or like, it's not my fault. Our planes are good. We're safe. We've always had a good record. And it kind of felt like this full-page letter was not apologizing. Instead, it was just saying, we're still safe. You can still trust us. It's not our fault, but it's hard to believe. So that felt to me like it could have been unethical communication. I don't know if the CEO was just incompetent, if someone in the organization didn't communicate well, and it is actually a software engineer's fault that this happened, or if people were trying to keep it quiet because it would be embarrassing news, and they were hoping to fix it without anyone finding out about it. All right, what are ethics as the authors understand them, as you understood them and up to now, and which ethical framework or frameworks, etc., do you mostly align with? Okay, starting on page 65, the authors introduced the chapter in saying that determining goodness in ethics and communications is not always black and white. It's like I was kind of mentioning before, the facts are so vague, the motivations are so vague, it's hard to really figure out what's going on, how do you judge what's good about something. And so speaking of ethics itself, the definition goes back to the Greek term ethos, for the character or nature of a society. So that means in this group of people, what's the norm? And that term ethics then these days means, what do we consider to be okay? So as a matter of fact, in the preface on page 4, the authors emphasize that they believe that ethics is a very important topic that they'll reference throughout the book. Rather than closing the topic after chapter 2, they want to make sure to incorporate it in the context of other chapters as well. So I expect we're going to see more about ethics as we go on. So I felt I aligned with Redding's typology of unethical OC from pages 89 to 93, which does focus on communication. Actually, how information exchange can be used in ways that are damaging to others. This hits home. It hits close to home with me because I believe I have encountered many of these typologies firsthand. I've worked with people that I feel behaved unethically. They used information in the different ways that are described in the book. I know it. And I recognize it can be very damaging, even though it's just words or people saying things or withholding information. It can be it can hit you emotionally, and it can affect your job at the company. Okay, in what ways does the video regarding ethics and our course overlap? The video presented a lot about cross-cultural organizations and how the social norms of ethics may be different in different populations. Just as the authors define ethics on page 65 with the Greek term ethos itself, it refers to the nature or disposition of a culture, which it suggests that ethics and norms are relative to different populations, to different parts of the world and cultures. And the video described how some cultures have even drastically changed their norms in order to fit in with dealing with other business partners. For example, they talked about how in Japan it used to be much more the norm that you would bribe. It was not considered corrupt. It was just what you do. But as they started to incorporate with Western norms, where we consider it to be pretty shady and outright illegal to bribe, they've had to stop doing that. And it still happens sometimes, and it's weird when we see it, but that's the norm. You got to understand. It used to be the norm. What area do you believe the authors missed or got wrong in the discussion about ethics? Okay, so far be it from me to answer this question. I believe I am new to the topic of OC, and I have a fair amount of interest in ethics. Um, I thought the authors put together a pretty extensive overview of the different perspectives on the topic. They've listed, I don't know how many, 6 or 8 different uh, approaches, research studies that put together different ideas on how to view ethics and communication. Um, and as with many social sciences and philosophy, I think the authors tend to give too much credit or optimism towards human nature. So this is my only fault. As I'm reading the book, it was fairly clinical and sterile that, okay, humans choose sometimes to make bad choices, take actions that are not helpful to others, whatever. No, I actually see that different, that most of us are pretty selfishly motivated. We are always looking for ways to get away with stuff. We're always trying to find ways to cover up what we did. It's human nature is a very big dirty factor that I don't think the authors really addressed. I mean, the way they present it's still something academic that's out of a book instead of the way people really act. And just for the sake of citing my sources, the idea did come up that communications and businesses and deal makers tend to act in their own best interest and to take risks to get ahead, as in point 3 of Ranch's finding on page 88. And so I look forward to the discussions in class. I look forward to commenting on other people's, and I'd love to tell you stories about how I got screwed over by someone's unethical communications. Take care. Bye-bye.